So be honest, how many of you clicked on this video thinking it was porn? Don't lie, Jesus knows. John in the Hole is brought to us by first-time director Pascal Sisto and stars Charlie Shotwell, Tessa Farmiga, Michael C. Hall, and Jennifer Ill. Okay, so I'm going to try and give as few details about this story away as possible. The basic synopsis is that 13-year-old John traps his family, his mother, father, and sister, in a hole in the ground in their backyard, where he keeps them captive. Where it goes from there, you'll have to watch the movie to see. Now, as odd as that premise sounds, it's not as far out there as you would think. Yes, there is a big-ass concrete hole out in the woods that John does trap his family in, but we are given a valid reason as to why that hole is there. However, that's about all the validation for motivations that you're going to get in this movie. A lot of the things that happen in this movie, you have to kind of decipher why you think that characters are doing the things that they're doing. Clearly, everything is not okay with John, and his reasoning for putting his family in this hole, or at least the reasoning I came up with, is a bit overkill if you ask me. However, that does kind of go along with something being a bit off with John. Ultimately, we are left with a story about a 13-year-old disturbed boy who is left in a house alone, totally to his own devices. And he's got his family in a hole in the backyard, and we have absolutely no idea what he intends to do with them. It's kind of hard to classify this film. Some might say it has some horror elements, others say it's a drama. It has a bit of thriller. If I had to put a label on it, I would say that this is a psychological thriller. But there are definitely a whole lot of other genres that come into play here. However, when it comes to the psychological thriller side of things, I would say that probably is the best representation of what this film is. This movie's got some really disturbing imagery, not so much in like gory and nasty or anything like that. It's more the idea behind what you're seeing, what is going to happen, the implication of it all. Because you really don't know this entire time what the fuck John's gonna do next. And I truly did fear for the other characters' lives that were around him throughout this film. And he's not like some stereotypical movie sinister villain or anything. He's a 13-year-old kid who is quite a bit misunderstood and a bit out there at times, but he's not sinister in the traditional way. What does make his character sinister, though, is that we do see what he is capable of, and he has zero remorse for any of it. We get the idea that John sees the world a little bit different than everybody else, but his character is layered. That's not all he is. We do see moments of him being vulnerable. We see that 13-year-old boy come out in him multiple times throughout the film. It's not just all the time sinister. And honestly, those little breaks of humanity are kind of what made it even more sinister, because he seemed all the more real, like a real person. And I've always said the most terrifying monsters in existence are human beings. Now, John's family is presented to us kind of from his viewpoint, so we don't have the best view of them from the beginning. When you get to thinking about it, they're really not that bad, but we are seeing it from his view. And he clearly sees his parents and sister kind of in a low light. And honestly, once they're down in the hole, some of the things that we witness they do and say and think kind of reinforce that to a degree. It's all very believable regardless of how kind of out there it seems. And a lot of that comes down to the great performances we get from everybody involved. This is a fairly small cast, but everybody is on point here. And yes, we got well-known names like Michael C. Hall that of course are doing a good job, but the clear standout here is young Charlie Shotwell as John. The movie is totally on his shoulders. There are very few scenes that he is not a part of, and not just part of, but the center of the scene. He carries this movie on his own and does a fantastic job doing it. He shows that not all child actors are bad. The movie is also filmed very interestingly. I really enjoyed watching this movie, and not just because of the story. I mean, like, visually. It is a visually striking movie. Is it the most beautiful movie ever made? No. But the camera angles and the technical technique on display here is very nice to look at. Also, the score is really good here. It's very low key and you almost don't notice it sometimes, but it is very effective in conveying what's going on. It's not necessarily one that I'm going to listen to in the car or anything, but for this movie, it did a fantastic job. I really like the score. So the movie looks great, it's got some great performances, and it's got a really interesting story, but not everything is perfect. There is one aspect of this film that I think is going to to turn off a whole lot of people. And that is the payoff, the ending of the film. This movie is probably going to be pretty divisive in how people view the end of the movie. And admittedly, while I didn't absolutely hate the end of the movie, I do wish we had just a little bit more. I understand what the movie was going for, I get what happened, but I still do wish there was just a bit more. That, and also, without ruining anything, there is a subplot that comes into play that isn't ever fully explained. And while I don't need, nor did I ever expect this type of movie to fully explain this situation that's going on with a mother and daughter, I was hoping that we would get just a bit more than what we ended up with. I think I know what they were going for with it, but it was so vague and so little that the way that they left it, it almost just didn't need to be there. And not that I minded it being there, it was interesting, but as it's going on, as the movie's going on, you're kind of expecting to get a bit more of an explanation, at least a little bit, but you just don't. The movie is very ambiguous in that right. And I'm cool with ambiguity, but it is a very thin line. You gotta know how much you can and can't give. You give too much and it's no longer ambiguous. You don't give enough and it's just kind of fucking confusing, and that's what it was here. Overall, I did enjoy the narrative of John in the Hole, but the ending moments don't quite provide the payoff that you're wanting, and that does affect the entire thing a bit. Guys, John in the Hole is a very interesting film. It's got a lot of things going for it. It's got a really interesting story, some great performances, it looks and sounds fantastic. But in their quest to leave things a bit ambiguous, they went a bit too far and didn't give enough in the end. And while that did affect the final product, it didn't ruin the whole thing. I still did enjoy the film and think John in the Hole is absolutely worth a rent.
All he wanted was this.
To return some videotape.
This is a weird ass, sometimes pretty creepy little movie. So if you're in the mood for a solid psychological thriller for the night, but you're okay with it being pretty open-ended, then check out John in the Hole, and I think you'll have a really good time with it. So there it is, guys, my review of John in the Hole. If you enjoyed and want more content like this, hit that subscribe button and help my little channel grow. If you want to help out the channel, check out my Patreon in the description below and become a jarhead and get some of the awesome benefits that go along with that, like these guys. And maybe join my top tier and become a bad motherfucker like my man Greg. If you liked what I had to say, give me a like. If not, let me know in the comments below why. And as always, stay sexy, Redman.
I'm sorry.
Now there's one detail I do want to discuss real quick about this movie, and it's not a spoiler at all. It's kind of out there at times, this movie is. There is one thing about it that is probably the most realistic depiction of something I've ever seen on film, and that would be 13-year-old online gamers. We get one or two scenes of John and one of his friends playing an online game with each other, and we get to hear their dialogue. And regardless of what you may think of your little Jimmy and how much of a little angel he is, the way they're talking in this movie, that is the most realistic depiction of 13-year-old online gamers I've ever fucking seen. Every other word's like fuck and fuck you and shit and piss off and fuck off and just all that. It's just expletive laden. And regardless of what you think, when you're not looking, that's how most of them are. It's kind of like any of my videos. Makes you think.